what Jesus is saying about loving your enemies is God, but then at the same time, Old Testament, when there is extreme violence, or hey, I am going to just destroy this city, this town, how's that consistent?
The flood. People died. You know what I mean? Lots of people died. And then Sodom and Gomorrah, people died. You know, God was responsible for these people dying. The plagues, firstborn, they weren't involved in this. They died. And so it's like acknowledging Uzzah, when he was, or is it Uzzah, they were moving the ark, right? Yeah. And the cart was like, oh, wait, it's unstable. I want to stop the ark from moving. But they said, don't touch the ark. But he just kind of did this to the ark, and then he gets struck down. Like God kills him. Or like, is it in Leviticus or Exodus? No, it's Deuteronomy, where they talk about disobedient children. Stone them. If they are disobedient, bring them to the elders. If they're still disobedient, then you should stone them, kill them. It's like, whoa, what are we talking about here? So it's like we've got to hold those two things in tension. We can't just like pretend that it doesn't happen and that God wasn't behind some of that.
And I mean I think that's where some confusion starts to build up, because I think about, so the Old Testament, there's some of that. It's like you're stoning kids, or your people are dying for what probably my kids do every single day. You know, in my house, just doing something dumb, throwing things across the house.
Is it bad to like just be like, well, you know, there are times with some of my kids that they did stuff. I was like,
did they need a stoning?
No, I'm just kidding. Horrible.
So like, seriously, I look at some of that stuff and I think like, man, I mean, my kids are wild sometimes. Like were they hitting the threshold of when kids needed to be stoned in the Old Testament?
Well, no. Okay, so we probably should put that in context. You're talking about somebody who's disobedient, and disobedient today and disobedient back then is a very, very different thing. Disobedient was like they were completely removing themselves from the rhythm of the community. They were either getting drunk or doing or abusing other people or not even caring about how this affected the family and a family name. And it talks about how bringing them to the elders, that they still don't listen, you know, so it was a major thing. It wasn't just like they were on the iPad too long, you know, it wasn't something like that. But see, the thing is, we listen to this stuff. We talk about the flood, we talk about Uzzah, you talk about all these different things, and we think like, man, that's hard to stomach. But the people back then had the same reaction. You know, you had Moses saying, whoa, God, no. God's like, you know what? I'm tired of these people. Maybe we ought to just get rid of them, which a holy God has the right to consider. And Moses is like, no, you don't have to do that. That's overkill. Okay, you don't have to do that. Abraham, same way. You're gonna destroy Sodom. Was it Sodom and Gomorrah where he questions them?
I think so.
Yeah.
And does he start at 50?
I can't remember what he starts at, but he rolls down to 1.
10.
10.
Wasn't it 10? Was it 1?
I'm not sure.
I think it was 1 at
Jamie?
some point.
Somebody look
Jamie,
up.
help.
Yeah. So the idea, though, there is that even the people back then were questioning it. So I think that adds a layer of authenticity to it, that even they were like, whoa, this seems a little too much.
And so again, like almost like people were resisting God's wrath. They're saying like, hey, that they were almost like noticing like, hey, that seems a little harsh.
Yeah.
Because then again, I would think about Jesus, who is God. And so he's teaching, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. Like almost like this sense of, you might have to put up with a lot. Like you need to like actually be prayerful of them, you know, not necessarily exact wrath on them. And
again, this is an editorial or redactive type of moment to say, if you're trying to create a story that you're going to sell to a bunch of people, like, we're going to make up this imaginary God. We want everybody to believe in this. This wouldn't be in it.
Yeah.
You know, you would have said, why don't we just get rid of that? Because that's really hard to stomach.
And so how maybe say more about that? Like, how do we make sense of something like that? Like, does that mean that what Jesus is saying about loving your enemies is God, but then at the same time, Old Testament, when there is extreme violence, or hey, I am going to just destroy this city, this town, how's that consistent?
This is where
we both look at each other.
This is going to be the podcast. Like, I don't know. You want to say something?
I would say, we got a snapshot of Jesus' life here. Right? Obviously, changed the whole world. I would be careful for us not to just, almost like I was talking about earlier, just hyper fixate on just that side of Jesus too. Because I mean, the Jesus we see coming back in Revelation is very different.
That's
like,
good.
Like he's not he's done washing feet at that point. Like he's here
And
to.
Jesus cursed the fig tree, right? Was it a fig tree?
I think it was. Yeah, he's like, you're done. Like no more.
Yeah.
Branch, yeah.
And it's kinda
No more
oh,
fruit.
Wait, what? Why?
Yeah.
Getting angry
So
here.
even stuff like that, human things like that, it's like sides of him we wouldn't really associate with Jesus.
Yeah.
But he's like, yeah, ticked off at the tree and killed the
So
tree.
this reminds me of a story. I was talking to a guy. We were in a truck. We were on our way to the airport in Morocco, and he was Arabic, and we were speaking in French. So like, it was interesting because I was he spoke pretty quickly, but I was able to follow, and we were going back and forth. And I was like, man, this is a great opportunity to ask a Muslim about Islam. You know, and I'm like, so, you know, tell me more about Muhammad. And he's telling me about Muhammad. Tell me more about this. And then he mentioned something about heaven. And I'm like, yeah, so what do you need to do to get into heaven? And he mentions like the 5 things that you need to do to get into heaven, the standard 5, like the shahada, you know, prayers, giving to the poor, making your hajj, the trip to Mecca. He goes through all of them. And I was like, so you get into heaven then? And he goes, well, maybe. And I was like, wait, what? And he goes, well, I mean, it's up to God. I was like, so you don't know if you make it into heaven? He's just like, no, he's God. Like, it's up to him. I was like, wait a second. So if I get into heaven, can I stay in heaven? He's like, maybe. I was like, wait, you're saying I can't even have eternal security, you know, like in heaven? And he kept looking at me so strange, like, he's God. I was like, so he can kick me out for any reason? He's like, yeah. He's God. And it was funny because I mentioned to him, I was like, boy, that's different. And he goes, why? And I mentioned about grace. And I kind of talked through the whole thing. I was witnessing to him. It was like illegal at the time. But then he goes like this. He goes, let's change the subject. As soon as I had mentioned about Jesus. And I always wondered, like, what did he mean by that? Like, let's change the subject. I don't want to hear anymore. You're an idiot. Or like, this is illegal, what you're doing. You're sharing Christ with me. Or like, that is so far off base of who God really is. I'm just going to stop you right now and just save you from looking stupid. But I guess what I'm trying to say is like, do we need a little bit more of that sense of like, dude, he's God. And so you can't just invalidate your belief in something because you don't like it or you don't agree with it.
You don't understand it.
Yeah.